So in Genesis 1, which is where we'll go, what's the story that we're going to see?
God created the world.
Creation, right. So before we get there, Genesis is part of a group of books in the Bible referred to as the Torah or the Pentateuch or the Law. What books are in that group?
Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy.
Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Is that all of them? Or is that too many?
In the first 5 books of the Bible, that's them.
That's the first 5. Yeah, so the first 5. Who was the author? Who was the one who put pen to papyrus or paper or whatever it was? Moses. Yeah, Moses recorded Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. About how many, here's a challenge, I don't think Kerrigan knows this one. About how many years after creation did Moses record the Torah? The first 5.
Like 4,000 or something like that. It was a lot.
So from creation to Jesus was about 4,000 if we go straight by the biblical timeline, which I do.
2,000?
Yeah, a little over 2,000. Yeah, I don't remember exactly. I want to say like 2,300-ish. I don't remember for sure. But it was... Okay, Kerrigan, do you have it on there?
It doesn't say when the beginning was, but when Moses was born, it was... really far away.
Bring it here. Bring it here. She said it was really far away.
Far away. Yeah.
Oh, this is just from Abraham on.
Oh.
Yep, so as Moses is being around 1500 BC, so that would be 2,500 years or so after creation, Moses recorded the Torah. Now that is a very, very long time from the original instance to it being recorded. How reliable would historians give an account? How much reliability would secular historians give an account if it was written 2,500 years after the original event?
Based on their length of life, I would say it would be still very reliable.
Yeah. So it would be like the temple in Jerusalem fell in 586, 587 BC, right? Which was about coming up on 2,600 years before I was born. Now, how reliable would it be if I sat down now and recorded what happened when the temple in Jerusalem fell, just from my knowledge?
Not reliable.
Man, you're not going to call that reliable at all,
Nope.
right? So why do we give such credibility to Moses recording the first 5 books of the Bible?
Because he lived longer than we did.
At that point,
So
Moses
there were
didn't live.
generations of the word going through, unlike us.
Yeah, our lifespans are much shorter.
Shorter.
Yeah, how long did Adam and his sons and grandsons live? It was all like around 900 years, right? We looked at, I think we mentioned it, I don't know if it was this Tuesday or last, but we looked very briefly at the timeline, right? Adam, the generations of Adam as the Bible records, and when you go through that and you graph it, you see that Adam lived at the same time as Noah's father. Even though the flood happened, what did we say, like 1,800 years after creation.
Oh.
Adam would have been able to know Noah's father, right? The lifespans back then, because the human DNA hadn't been corrupted by time, right? They lived a whole lot longer. So that's one reason. What's another reason?
Is it because of what they found from archaeology.
Yeah, so archaeology has given a lot of credence to the creation story.
Isn't the Bible one of the most supported written word that there is?
Yeah, it is the most supported ancient text in the world. There are fragments of it that we find everywhere, and they all, with greater than 99% reliability, confirm what's in our Bible right here, right? And the mistakes that we do find, often they're punctuation marks that were added incorrectly in the wrong spots. There are a few verses, and I've highlighted those, right? The end of the Gospel of Mark has a few verses, and chapters 8 in John has a few verses that we've learned were not exactly where they are now, right? Because we've found older manuscripts. But the Bible is the most textually supported ancient document we have. What's the greatest reason of all, though?
Repeat the question.
Why do we give such credibility to the first 5 books of the Bible, since they were written down so long after creation happened?
He's writing their oral traditions. He's writing the stories that they have passed down.
Yeah, so we know from extra biblical sources that the Jews placed a huge emphasis on perfectly accurate oral tradition, such to the point that if a young man who was going into the priesthood couldn't recite perfectly the Torah, they weren't allowed in, right? Their oral tradition had such a high level of accuracy. Number one reason of all, though, is what? What is this?
The Word of God.
This is the Word of God, and we believe that it was inspired by God, right? So it wasn't just Moses out of his own head recording, it was God assisting him in recording what happened. That's why we give such credibility to these first 5 books. So with that context, let's start reading. Can anybody tell me, without looking at your Bible, what is Genesis 1:1? Can you quote it?
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was... No,
That's John 1:1. It sounds really, really similar, doesn't it?
In the beginning, God created
The
heavens and the
the
earth.
heavens and the earth.
Yes. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Kerrigan, can you tell me again what John 1:1 says?
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God.
Yeah. John began his gospel with the same pattern that Genesis began, and that was deliberate. Why would John have done that?
I guess he wanted to make sure that he quoted directly on what was said about God and how it started.
Yeah, the Jews would have been intimately familiar with these first couple verses. So when John recorded his gospel about Jesus, to prove to them that Jesus was God, that he was with God in the beginning, he called back to the creation story. Right from the very beginning of his gospel, his point was to show Jesus was God. Right, so he goes back to creation. The Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Verse 3 of Genesis 1. And God said, what? Let there be light. And the blind man said, I see, right? God said, let there be light. And there was light. So how did light come into being? He spoke it.
That's great.
He spoke, and it happened.
That's great.
By the power of his word, light came into being. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were over the expanse, and it was so. God called the expanse heaven. And that's the physical heaven, the sky, right? God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening and there was morning the second day. And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together in one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. So let's pause there. Any questions about what God did with the water?
I have one. It's a linguistics question. Is the word heaven that we use for sky, is that a different Hebrew word than the one for heaven?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Mike, can you grab the Old Testament ones from right there? Should be 2 for the Old Testament and 2 for the New Testament.
Okay. Oh, I gotta move now.
Oh.
Oh. He was only supposed to rock.
One required.
That's why Becky
That's why I moved over.
You want the word study for the Old Testament, right?
Yeah,
Probably
you,
should've left
yeah,
it.
you keep one and then pass the other one to me.
Alright.
All right, so you have the Bible. So if you could open up to Genesis 1 verse 8 and tell me what number is over the word heaven there.
Okay, here we go.
Mine has number 3.
Would you like to borrow my glasses?
I know, I can't.
Which word did you want? The heaven?
Heaven. Or that one might say firmament.
Get my glasses.
Yeah, I can't. 8 zeros?
You want my glasses?
8064? No, that's not gonna help. Hold on. I'm kidding. I really can't read that number. That is so tiny. Yeah, you come over here with your young eyes. Find verse 8.
That's the right one. That is
8064?
8064.
Woo! I don't need glasses.
You need a magnifying glass. I have one.
Hush now.
Give me this.
I got one.
We have a few of those. All right, so that word in the Hebrew, this doesn't really matter, but it's samayim. Samayim means in English heaven or sky, and it is used, oh, I can't even count. Looks like 30, 150, 180 times throughout the Old Testament, always meaning heaven or sky. It's
Okay.
the physical sky, not God's dwelling place, heaven.
So there is a different word for that then.
Well, it's the same word used in Genesis 1:1. It
God
says,
created the
In the
heavens and
beginning,
the
God
earth.
created
Heavens
the
and
heavens
earth.
and the earth.
so that's the physical sky that he's speaking of there.
Not really an important question.
Well, it could be.
Well, I was thinking, no, that is a good question. I was thinking about that. I was like, okay, is there a difference?
So any question about what God did with the water?
Well, tapping into some knowledge here, see if it's accurate or not. So when he separated the waters above, it was, I'm assuming you're talking about the waters above are the clouds, the tropical environment that existed initially. Am I in the right ballpark?
Well, let's look at what do we know happens later in Genesis, like chapters 6 through 8. We get a massive flood,
Yes.
right? Where does and we can tell based on reading that rain hadn't fallen on the earth before the flood, right? We see that water came up out of the ground to water the plants. Okay. So when the flood happens, where the entire earth, the land, it all gets covered with water, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not that the seas can just elevate themselves, right? Because there has to be The water has to come from somewhere.
Would they say it rained for 40 days and 40
It rained for
nights?
40 days and 40 nights. So there was a massive amount of water in the atmosphere, right? More than what our atmosphere now holds, right? So creationists, some of them believe that it was just the clouds, that God's referencing the water vapor that's in the clouds was separated from the water that's in the seas. Others think that maybe there was a water layer to the atmosphere,
Yeah.
and that helped. They think, maybe that helped with people living a long time. Because what happens when you block all the harmful UV radiation from the sun from getting to Earth? Well, that UV radiation shortens our lives, right? Mm-hmm. What happens if you stay out in the sun with no cover indefinitely?
You get crispy.
You'll get crispy, you'll burn, but eventually it becomes too much, right? Especially around the equator. Right? The human body cannot take continual sun exposure. So some creationists think that that was another factor that contributed to the long lives, was that there was a protective layer. There was more water absorbing UV rays in the atmosphere. Regardless, whichever way it was, we know definitively from the Bible that God put the sky and separated the waters that were on the ground from the water that was in the atmosphere.
Does that mean there was no rivers or brooks or streams or creeks going through the land?
No, it does not mean that.
Okay.
Because it gives, later in Genesis, we're told that this garden that God will create, the Garden of Eden, was located between which two major rivers?
Tigris and Euphrates?
The Euphrates and the Tigris rivers, right? Which both still exist today. So we can get, actually it's probably on Kerrigan's Globe. You can open up a picture, I believe it's of Iraq. I think it's Iraq, modern day Iraq, where the Tigris and the Euphrates run. And you can see a big, there's a large area in there. We don't know where it was eventually, right? The flood wiped it out. But
The globe or the world map. It's flat and colorful.
bring the map, Kerrigan.
Definitely the world map, because the other one's the United States. Would you like a magnifying glass?
No. My eyes work. I'm not Mr. Mike.
You're younger, right?
Tell me if the reading is too small, because it's hard
I
to
got it, sweetie. Thank you. Oh, it does show rivers. So, in Iraq, modern day, bring this around. They're not labeled very well, but there are two. You've got Euphrates right there,
Yeah.
and the Tigris is the one on the north. And so there's another blue line. So just southeast of Baghdad is a big space between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Garden of Eden was somewhere in there. Euphrates.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, okay,
So that star is Baghdad, right? And southeast,
South.
there's a space between the
Yeah.
Euphrates and the Tigris River. Green Iraq, and then the rivers down there. So that was where the garden was. Get up the light.
Here, right. Where are you?
So Iraq.
Yep.
And then Euphrates is right there.
Oh, okay.
The Tigris is the one to the north. That's not the best map, but Iraq.
Yeah.
Euphrates River.
Oh, okay. So where was the Garden of Eden to start with?
Somewhere between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers.
In Iraq.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's the one to the north of the Euphrates. It's not labeled on here. So there's two other rivers that are listed as being the boundaries, the east and west boundaries of the garden, but they don't exist anymore. So we don't know exactly where it was. And do you remember when Adam and Eve were kicked out? Why couldn't they go back? Right, they ate from the fruit, and that's why they were sent away. But why couldn't they just turn around and go back into the garden?
Wasn't there an angel at the gate?
There's an angel with a flaming sword guarding the entrance to the garden, so that no one could enter it again.
And out of all of the history that has been found, there hasn't been anything that helped to identify where the two dried up rivers were to.
If there is, I'm not aware of it.
There might be big dents in the dirt.
There could be big dents in the dirt, right? No, that makes sense. But if we have found those, I'm unaware. I haven't looked into it for a long time.
Even in archaeology, if there was anything that would have identified a river bed,
Mm-hmm.
down into the soil.
Mm-hmm. Problem is the country that it's in.
Right.
We can't go in there doing stuff like that anymore.
Could you ever?
I don't know. Not in the last 100 years. No. So God separated the water on the earth from the water in the heaven, and after each thing that God did, what did he say?
It was good.
He saw that it was good, right? So verse 11, God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and the fruit trees bearing fruit, which is in which is their seed, each according to its kind on the earth." So he's calling the vegetation to reproduce according to its kind. What does that phrase mean? According to its kind.
So, like I said, the fruit would have the seed in the fruit, so it would actually bear of the same fruit.
The same species.
So it all
Would
regenerated
multiply.
its own way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the
However
orange
that
tree
may
is
be.
going to reproduce, but it's not going to make new apple trees.
Right.
It's going to make new orange trees, right?
Right.
So in the beginning, God set up the species, right? And each would produce according to its kind. There's blow one against one modern theory taught in schools, right? Evolution.
Yeah.
God said, the Bible says, each species will reproduce according to its kind, right? Each according to its kind on the earth, and it was so. Verse 12. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the third day.
I was just gonna say, it's just like right off the bat, you see God is very, not only organized, but it's just a very logical process. He's just not abstract and just, oh, let's just try this. He's very much planned out.
It's like he knows what the results of what he does are going to be. Yeah. No chaos. Verse 14, and God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night. And let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And it was so.
I gotta interrupt you. Sorry. I just keyed in. I was thinking in the beginning there was just one season.
Well, what is it about the earth?
That was the moons and all of that. That was just created. That's what it's saying.
The sun and the moon and the
Yes,
stars.
sun.
So why do the stars? What do the stars have anything to do with seasons on Earth?
Gravitational pull.
No, way too far away for that.
They
The moon is the only body that has,
The pull.
because it can increase or decrease the tides depending on what part of the month it's in.
And each of the other planets have their own pulls and pushes. And
Right, but they
How
don't
does
they
that
don't have
all
a
affect
measurable
our
impact on the Earth though.
But no impact on our moon.
It's too close to the Earth, like orders of magnitude.
Yeah.
Too
Not
far away.
really in our, whatever that's called.
Oh, astronomy is one of my
Astronomy.
geek out spots. So let's back up. What is it about the Earth that gives us seasons?
All depends on its tilt.
spin.
So the Earth rotates, right? That's how we get day and night.
Just like that globe on the table, it rotates.
Yeah, the globe rotates, but look at the angle, right? It's not rotating like a top like this, right? It's tilted. Let's geek out even more. What degree are we tilted at? 23 degrees. No, this matters. You guys know what the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn is? It's a line, right? The equator is at 0 degrees latitude, right? The center as far as we can tell. And then 23 degrees north and 23 degrees south are what we call the Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn. That's how far the sun, right? In the middle of summer, the sun is directly over the tropic, the northern tropic. And in the middle of northern hemisphere winter, the sun is directly over the southern 23 degree line. Either way, we know the Earth is tilted 23 degrees because we've identified those lines. What does that tilt give us? Seasons.
Day and night.
Gives us seasons, right? The
Seasons,
rotation
right.
gives us day and night. The tilt gives us seasons. There is a time of year where you can see Orion a whole lot better
Which is winter.
in the winter, right? Orion is higher in the sky. That group of stars is higher in the sky in the northern hemisphere during winter. So, how are the stars for seasons, as Genesis said? Because some constellations are visible better in the winter than they are in the summer. And some we can't even see in the winter here because they're closer to the equator. That's how the stars are for seasons. And they knew that back then.
That would be incredibly important for them because they didn't have the maps and compasses for navigation.
The
Mhm.
sailors would have to use the stars.
The sailors would have to use the stars, and in order to correctly use the stars, they would also need to know the date, because various stars were in different positions at different times of the year.
And they didn't
And
have
the sun
satellites
for
to
time.
confuse you between satellites
And the sun
stars.
for time. Yeah, so how does the sun help them with time?
Where it is.
Where it is in the sky, and they
How many
also
hands?
need
How many hands before the mountain?
the hand trick that I showed you. Yep.
What is
That hand.
So you go hiking and you don't have a watch, you don't know sunset, sunrise, or anything, right? You go a little unprepared. You can take your hand at your arm length and put your thumb on the sun and count how many hands until you hit the horizon, and that's approximately how many hours of daylight you have left.
So each of your hands is an hour?
About. I mean, it's very approximate, but like if you're hiking in the winter and you need to get back before it gets hot, make sure you don't lose track.
Do you mean cold?
Hmm?
Do you mean cold? You said hot.
I'm not cold. Yeah, you know what I meant.
So why did God make all of these different things with the stars?
So where did the constellations come from? Right? That's what you're...
Right.
We saw shapes in the sky.
We what?
Humans saw shapes in the sky.
Oh,
Yeah, so the Western world has various names for constellations, right? Cassiopeia, Orion, Ursa Major. We've got all these names, and they all come from Greece, right? But you go to the Eastern world, they don't recognize those constellations. They had their own. And in the hearts of Africa, they had their own constellations. Because it's just groupings that humans saw, and we divided the sky into 12 slices, and each slice is a major constellation.
So that was their actual map back then.
The stars were the map. That's why if you read any ancient accounts of sailors who went from Europe and then they cross the equator for the first time, they go south, and what do they find when they look up to try and find their navigational stars? It's a brand new sky. The North Star can't be seen from the southern
Is
hemisphere.
that why they thought the Earth was flat to begin with? Is because of the change?
Actually, ancient worlds, Egypt, ancient civilizations, they knew it was round. Right? When we went through the Dark Ages, that myth of the Earth being flat came about. Right? You go back and you look at the math that Egypt used to make the pyramids and all kinds of ancient civilizations, they knew the Earth was round. And that knowledge was lost during the Dark Ages. Yeah.
It's just so neat, to hear these things, because it's such organization, and this is where I don't understand how people can believe in evolution, which comes from a big bang, a big explosion. There's no such thing as creating order from a major explosion.
Yeah.
It's such a major leap to even conceive that.
Yeah, the definitions are opposite.
Yeah.
An explosion is a chaos chaotically destructive process that defines an explosion.
So the stars and other planets, just there for God's glory.
There for God's glory. And to provide light and navigation
You
for
don't
us.
think that God actually set the stars up in a certain way, knowing that humans would then be able to relate to them? I mean, you have these travels of them moving from place to place to spread the word. You just said that those stars were their maps, so I feel God probably really put them in a way that they could be identified for travel.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah, I just, when I said that we saw the shapes, I meant that we defined what the shapes were. But yeah, God put them there and made patterns that were different from other parts of the sky so that we could see them.
The Big Dipper.
Big Dipper, Ursa Major.
The Ursa Major is
I was
North
told
Star.
if the Big Dipper
North
was
Star.
tipped, it was going to rain.
No. No. If you spend an entire night in a sleeping bag with your head on a pillow and your eyes looking at the sky, the Big Dipper comes up and it's tilted like this when it first
Right,
comes over
right.
the horizon. And what does the entire sky, northern sky, do at night? It rotates. It rotates, right? What does the sun do throughout the day? It rises and sets in the west, right? Every constellation and the moon and every planet, everything in the sky does the same thing if you sit there and you look at it long enough at night. So whether or not the Big Dipper is tilted or not just depends on what time of night you looked at it. And what season, because there's more and less tilt depending on what season we're in. Yeah, if you set a camera and point it at the North Star at night, and then you leave the shutter open so it's a long exposure camera, you can see the trails of the stars moving. I've got a picture of that, several of those on my computer. But that's why when the moon first comes up, it's right there, right? You wait 6 hours approximately, and then it's going to be directly overhead. So that's midnight, or halfway between sunrise and sunset, because it all rotates. I like astronomy. I'll get off of that now. But yeah, God made, what does Genesis tell us? The stars, the lights in the night were for what? For signs and seasons and days and years. He set it up so we could track time and seasons based on the sky. Now, most of us today have lost that ability because we have watches and calendars, right?
Clocks.
And clocks.
In the end, change time.
Yes.
Yeah, change.
Yes. To suit
That
us.
horrible change.
Yeah, so if our way of counting the days and the years was perfect, we wouldn't have to add an extra day in our calendar every 4 years. We're off. Even our modern perfect calendar and everything is off in tracking the way God set up.
So does that mean that in reality, a day is truly not 24 hours, that God did not make it a 24-hour day, so that if you were going to make the calendar so that you wouldn't have to add a day in February every 4 years, that a day is actually like being 23 hours and 15 minutes or something instead, that would be the day?
Yeah, so
Well, I was thinking that
14,
if we're having to add a day every
60.
4 years, then maybe a true day is 24 hours and 2 minutes.
That's right, because we're adding, not
Right.
subtracting.
Right. So it would be just a
Little
titch
bit
longer.
more, yeah.
You're born on.
Each day is 24 hours and then 1/1400th of a minute.
Wow.
So we're a little off. But yeah, every day is slightly longer.
That's not the truth. We're a little off.
Maybe an hour really isn't supposed
Work,
to
I
be.
guess.
Well, that's just how we're, yeah. And we're close. We just have to add an extra day every 4 years. And if you want to really geek out on it, you go and you find out how many seconds the National Atomic Timekeeping Body adds to the calendar every year, because they add seconds too. So.
Born on leap years.
Born on February 29th.
And you only turn a year older
Year
every 4
old.
years.
Yeah. I know.
Somebody born on this day.
That's how you're ageless.
So one other question. So regarding seasons,
Mhm.
so like in my mind, there's spring, summer, fall, winter. Back then they didn't have the winter or the fall.
Says who?
Says Mike Dowd. Because it was all right. So the little bit of reading I've done about creation was they were talking about because the way he had. So one of the things I read was they found palm leaves in Greenland. So one of the creation theories I had been reading about a long time ago was that this was the whole planet, the whole Earth was in a tropical environment. Then I made the assumption, okay, so they must have had a very pleasant, because two thoughts. One, because of that, it had to have been a warm environment all year round. And number two, they had no clothes in the very beginning, and I doubt he would have them running around with no clothes on in the wintertime. I mean, I know that's kind of
And there's no
But you
place in
want-
the Bible that I can think of that's cold or what's not.
But I wonder if they had the seasons, but because of the, as we said, the upper waters, if that is what actually made the difference for
Right.
the way the
right.
actual atmosphere on the earth was.
Yeah, what happens if you set up a clear tent, a clear dome tent in the yard in the middle of summer? What's the temperature in that tent going to be?
Warmer.
Cooking.
Cooking.
Right, so what happens if you cover the entire earth in even just extra water vapor from the clouds, but let's go all the way and say if there is a layer of water in the atmosphere. Greenhouse effect. Right? And it would be warm up to Greenland. Yeah. But but even if none of that's true, we know that the earth, even just in the last 6,000 years, we know that we've gone warm, hot, cold, ice.
It runs in like a 7-year cycle.
Yeah, like 150 years ago, we were in a mild ice age, right? And the Earth does this over time, right? Because our orbit around the sun is not, we wobble a little bit, right? And the Earth wobbles a little bit in its rotation, so that perfect 23 degrees, it's not always a perfect 23 degrees. We kind of wobble as we rotate, and that makes warmer and colder years and cycles in the north and the south.
Why can't these environmentalists figure that out?
Because very rich, high-power people are using those concerns to affect what they want to do. That's all that is.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's also, if you acknowledge that, I mean, in a sense, you have to acknowledge a design creator.
Yes.
And then you'd have to acknowledge the fact, okay, if there is a design creator, then what the heck does he expect from us?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's the big thing. Anywhere you are in the Bible, if people admit that there might be a creator, someone who made us, then the next logical thing is, okay, if someone made me, do I owe that creator anything?
Yes.
Yes, but people don't want to answer that question. It's much easier to just deny the existence of a creator and let's buy into the Big Bang, right? That this all just happened, right? That 4.6 billion years ago, when the Earth's sun, quote unquote, was formed, you know, the Earth was a rock and meteors brought water to the Earth, and because that's what they say, right? They say all the water on Earth came from meteors. And the logical question is, how did the meteors get the water? But they can't answer that, right? It's much easier to buy into that than admit that there's a creator. Because everybody on Earth, whatever their relationship with their mother is, everybody on Earth has to admit, well, she did give birth to me. I owe her a little bit, because at least she did that for me, right? People who have awful relationships with their mom will admit, well, she did give birth to me. She created me, is what they think, what they say, right? So they owe their mom at least a little bit of something. How much more do we owe God? Because he created us. Why does the world push evolution so hard when it makes no logical sense? Because the alternative is to admit there's a creator. And they don't want to do it.
Scary.
Mm-hmm. It is. You mean there's a being out there that just spoke me into an existence? That's frightening. If you don't know God, right, and if you don't know the Bible, that's life
So
changing.
where did God come from?
Oh.
There we go.
Well, we just wrapped up our study on God the Father about a month ago, right?
Right.
Month and a half ago. So let's go back to that. Where did God come from? When did he come into being, according to what we looked at in the Bible?
He has always been.
Okay, and what verse shows you that?
Oh, Lord have mercy.
It should be easy.
Yeah, I know. I'm thinking.
Oh,
Must be right in Genesis.
Genesis.
in the beginning.
In the beginning.
In the beginning.
You think of Alpha and Omega,
Yes. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last.
and that's Revelation.
That's Revelation. That's Revelation 2 or chapter 2 or 3.
You could go John 1:1.
You can go John 1:1. And what does it say?
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
And what does God say to Moses when Moses asks, "Who are you?"
I am who I am.
I am that I am. Right? You go back and you look at the Hebrew, and that means that he always was. No beginning, no end. Right?
And that's mind blowing.
That is,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
that's
how
hard to. How long?
How long was
Nobody.
there just God with nothing?
Well, now think about that. The verses we were just talking about. What was the point of the stars in the sky?
To guide people.
To guide people
Mm-hmm.
and to create a system for tracking time. Right? Does God need to operate based on time? Absolutely not, right? He's outside of time. He can speak things into being. God is outside of time.
He can make there be no right or no
So how long did he exist before Genesis? Well, time wasn't tracked then, right? He always was, according to the Bible. We cannot comprehend that. We have finite human minds that are very limited by time. We have to operate in one direction in time. We can't change. It's how we were made. But God is not like that.
Because he is all knowing.
Because he is all-knowing. He
And
is the
Jesus is.
creator.
And Jesus is very close
beginning.
to all knowing.
Beginning and the end.
Yeah.
He always will be.
So, the answer, he had no beginning. God is
No, we didn't.
and was and will be.
And it takes, and that's where faith kicks in. You just accept that. But the reality is, with anything you believe, whether it's evolution or anything, there's a piece that you can't answer completely.
Yeah, we can't logically answer or even understand everything about God. How is it that he had no beginning? Everything has a beginning. Even the heavens, the earth had the beginning. How did God not have a beginning? That's how our brain works.
If we could answer every question, there'd be no faith.
There'd be no faith. And what did Jesus say about those who have to operate based on faith rather than by sight?
They are blessed.
They are blessed. Right? Who was he talking to when he said that?
Thomas.
Thomas. Right? Because Jesus appeared to the 11, except Thomas wasn't there, right? So Jesus appeared to the 10 of the apostles and was with them for a while, and then he left. And then Thomas comes in, and what are they all doing? Thomas, he's back! Right? They would have been ecstatic. They're like, he's back. It didn't work. They tried to crucify him, and it didn't work, right? And what does Thomas think?
Yeah.
He doubts. You all are playing a trick on me. This is not funny, right? And what does he say? I won't believe until I have seen him and placed my hand in his side where the spear went, and I've touched the holes in his hands. And then when Jesus does come back and they're all 11 together, Jesus tells Thomas what? You believe because you have seen me and you have touched me. Greater are those and more blessed are those who see, who believe without seeing, those who have the faith. We can't see, we can't understand. I haven't touched Jesus, but I have faith that this is true and that faith is the only thing that places me in God's graces. We didn't even get through Genesis, chapter 1.
We didn't even get through the first.
I know. I know. That is okay. That is okay. Genesis, the creation story, is one that I think more than any other specific spot in the Bible prompts questions. And it prompts thinking because, well, I can't exactly say why. But I know that any group I've ever been in, any church I've ever been in, this story always makes more questions, more discussion, more thinking, and more growth than any other specific story in the Bible.
So next we're gonna take 5 years on Genesis.
5 years.
Yeah, you're learning snarky from your mama, aren't you?
Come on, I would only be 13 for 5 years.
How
Man.
about 1 year on?
My goal is
The
to.
first 5.
You could. You really could. No, my goal is from now until Christmas, I wanted to walk from creation through the Old Testament to the birth of Jesus at Christmas. And then from Christmas to Easter, I like what you suggested. We're going to walk through the life of Jesus from his birth to the cross. So that's why we went back to Genesis today.
It helps so much from my own personal experience to understand the Old Testament, even in broad strokes,
Mm-hmm.
to get into the New Testament. It makes so much more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Are we at least gonna take from the last Sunday of November to Christmas for the Christmas story? Because the last Sunday of November is the first Sunday of
We will see. At this rate, we might have to adjust that. But that's the goal. That's the goal.
So these people that don't believe in God, where do they think they come from?
Ah, well, you said it from the monkeys, right?